Matthew Whitaker walked into the House Judiciary Committee hearing room on March 14th with the kind of confidence that comes from believing you've already won. He'd spent the previous 48 hours on conservative media outlets dismissing what he called partisan fishing expeditions and desperate attempts to manufacture scandal where none exists. He'd described the committee's investigation as amateur hour, led by freshman members who don't understand how justice works. When asked specifically about Representative Jasmine Crockett, he'd smiled for the camera and said she was learning the ropes and still figuring out how congressional oversight actually functions. That dismissal would be the last comfortable moment of his public life. Whitaker settled into his chair at the witness table, adjusted his tie, and placed a single leather portfolio in front of him, the physical embodiment of a man who believed he needed nothing more than talking points. The gallery was full. C-SPAN cameras were positioned at 3 angles. Whitaker's legal team sat directly behind him, close enough to pass notes if needed. He glanced at his watch. He had a Fox News hit scheduled for 4 p.m. This was a formality to get through. Representative Crockett sat 4 seats down the dais, perfectly still, her jacket without a single crease. In front of her were 6 manila folders, each with colored tabs visible from across the room. Next to the folder sat an iPad, screen dark, and a single ballpoint pen placed with the precision of someone who had measured the distance. She had not looked at Whitaker once since he entered. She was reviewing something in the first folder, her expression giving away nothing. The chairman gavelled the hearing to order and recognized Whitaker for his opening statement. What followed was a 12-minute performance designed to dominate the room. Whitaker's voice carried the authority of someone who had served as acting attorney general, who had stood in the Oval Office, who understood power in ways these committee members could only imagine. He described his service to the nation. He outlined his commitment to the rule of law. He explained with barely concealed condescension that the Justice Department's independence meant that second-guessing prosecutorial decisions from congressional committees was not just inappropriate, it was dangerous to the constitutional order. He turned his attention to the specific allegations that had prompted the hearing. The $4 million figure being circulated by certain members was, he said, a deliberate mischaracterization of legitimate consulting fees paid by a private foundation for entirely legal advisory work. He had disclosed every dollar. He had violated no ethics rules. The foundation's work had been transparent and above board. Any suggestion otherwise was, he said with a slight smile, the kind of conspiracy theory that gets traction on social media but collapses under the weight of actual facts. He looked directly at Crockett for the first time. I understand some members are new to oversight work and may not fully understand how private sector compensation functions after government service. I'm happy to educate. The emphasis on educate landed exactly as he intended. Several members shifted in their seats. The room understood the insult. Crockett did not react. She continued reading the folder in front of her, turning a page with the same unhurried precision she had maintained since the hearing began. If she had heard Whitaker's statement at all, her face gave no indication. She made a small notation in the margin of a document. The pen moved smoothly across the page. Then she closed the folder, placed both hands flat on the table, and looked at the chairman. Her expression was neutral, almost gentle. She looked like someone about to ask a question about the weather. The chairman recognized her for 5 minutes of questioning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Her voice was measured, almost soft. Mr. Whitaker, I appreciate your willingness to appear today. I want to start with something simple just to establish a baseline. You served as acting attorney general from November 7th, 2018 through February 14th, 2019. Is that timeline accurate? Whitaker nodded, visibly relaxed by the simplicity of the question. Yes, that's correct. And during that time, you oversaw the special counsel's investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 election, correct? I provided oversight consistent with the regulations, yes. You've stated publicly, including in your opening remarks today, that you disclosed all income from outside sources during your time in government service. Is that accurate? Completely accurate? Every disclosure was filed on time and reviewed by ethics officials. Perfect. Thank you for confirming that. Crockett opened the first folder. The sound of the paper moving seemed louder than it should have been. She removed a single document, official letterhead visible even from the gallery, and placed it on the table in front of her. She did not hold it up. She simply looked at it for a moment, then back at Whitaker. The Foundation for Accountability and Civic Trust, Fact Foundation. You served on their advisory board from March 2017 through October 2018, correct? Yes, as I disclosed. And you've stated the two times $4 million in payments from FACT to your consulting firm between 2017 and 2019 were for legitimate advisory services, legal work, policy analysis. Is that your testimony? Whitaker's posture was still confident, but something in his face had shifted slightly. That's correct. Legitimate compensation for legitimate work. Crockett turned the document so it faced her more directly, though she did not read from it. FACT Foundation describes itself as a nonpartisan government watchdog organization focused on accountability and ethics in federal service. That's how they present themselves publicly. Correct? That's their mission statement, yes. But, Mr. Whitaker, I want to make sure we're working with complete information here. She opened the second folder. This one was thicker. The tabs were labeled with dates, because FACT Foundation's tax filings, which are public record, show that between 2017 and 2019, they paid your consulting firm exactly $2,127,000 across 17 separate transactions. The first payment was March 3rd, 2017. The final payment was February 28th, 2019, exactly 14 days after you left the Justice Department. Does that timeline match your records? Whitaker's lawyer leaned forward and whispered something. Whitaker waved him off. If those are the dates in the 990 filings, I'll accept that. I don't have the exact dates memorized. Of course not. That's why I brought the documents. Her tone remained gentle, almost apologetic for having to be so specific. But here's what I'm trying to understand. FACT Foundation filed their 2018 tax return listing total expenses of $4. $1 million? Your firm received $8 million of that. That's 44% of their entire annual budget going to one consultant. For a watchdog organization, that seems like a significant allocation of resources to a single advisory relationship. Would you agree that's an unusually large percentage? Whitaker's hands, which had been resting comfortably on the table, moved to grip the edge slightly. Large organizations compensate expertise appropriately. There's nothing unusual about that. I'm sure that's true in many contexts. Crockett's voice had not changed pitch or speed. But when I compare FACT's spending to other similar-sized nonprofit watchdog organizations, and I have those comparisons here in the third folder if you'd like to see them, the average compensation for outside advisory work is between 8 and 12% of total expenses. You are receiving 44%. That's not a small variance. That's a structural difference. So my question is, what specific work were you performing that justified compensation at more than 3 times the sector standard? The room had gone completely silent. Whitaker shifted in his chair. I provided strategic guidance on oversight priorities, legal analysis of executive branch ethics issues, and policy recommendations. Detailed work product. I'm certain it was detailed. Crockett opened the third folder. Because FACT Foundation's own public reports during that period, these are from their website, archived through the Wayback Machine, list their major investigative priorities for 2017 and 2018. Would you like me to read them, or do you remember what FACT was primarily focused on during the time you were their highest paid consultant? Whitaker's jaw tightened. I don't recall the specific list. Crockett looked down at the document. Hillary Clinton email investigation. Clinton Foundation financial practices. Obama administration FISA abuse. Potential crimes by former FBI Director James Comey. Those were FACT's 4 primary investigative focuses in 2017 and 2018, according to their own annual reports. During the exact period they were paying you $2. $4 million they were exclusively investigating Democrats in the previous administration. Does that refresh your memory about the nature of the strategic guidance you were providing? FACT is a nonpartisan organization. Whitaker's voice had risen slightly. Their targets are based on evidence, not politics. Nonpartisan. Crockett repeated the word as if tasting it. Let's examine that. She opened the fourth folder. This one had more documents organized with paper clips into sections. FACT Foundation's donor list isn't fully public, of course, but their 2018 tax filing requires disclosure of any donor who contributes more than $5,000 and whose donation represents more than 2% of total revenue. Between 2017 and 2019, FACT received $2 million in donations from 3 entities. Donors Trust contributed $1 million. The Judicial Education Project contributed $2, $8 million. And a donor-advised fund managed by the Bradley Foundation contributed $2, $3 million. Those 3 sources represent 100% of FACT's major disclosed funding during the period you were their primary consultant. Are you familiar with those organizations? Whitaker's face had begun to redden. I don't control who donates to the foundation. Of course not. But you were on the advisory board. You attended board meetings. So you would have known that Donors Trust is a conservative dark money network documented by the Campaign Legal Center as a pass-through vehicle for funding right-wing advocacy. You would have known that the Judicial Education Project was founded specifically to support conservative judicial appointments and has been involved in Supreme Court confirmation campaigns. You would have known that the Bradley Foundation has funded opposition research against Democratic candidates and progressive policies for 3 decades. This isn't secret information, Mr. Whitaker. This is their public work. So when you say FACT is nonpartisan, what you mean is their donor base is exclusively and documentably conservative, correct? Many organizations receive funding from ideological sources. It doesn't make their work partisan. I understand that argument. Crockett's voice remained measured, but something colder had entered it. But let's connect this to your compensation timeline because the dates matter. Your first payment from FACT, $142,000, was March 3rd, 2017. You were then a private citizen, recently departed from government service with a clear political profile. Nothing unusual about that. But then in July 2017, you published an opinion piece in CNN titled "Mueller's Investigation of Trump is Going Too Far." Do you remember writing that? Whitaker's hands were now flat on the table, pressing down. I remember the piece, yes. In it, you argued that the special counsel had exceeded his mandate and should be reined in. You suggested the investigation could be defunded or limited in scope. It was a fairly aggressive critique of an ongoing law enforcement investigation. That piece appeared July 6, 2017. On July 11th, 5 days later, FACT Foundation paid your firm $238,000, the single largest payment they'd made to you up to that point. Then in August, you appeared on Fox News and CNN 3 more times, each time criticizing the special counsel's investigation. On August 30th, FACT paid you $195,000. Do you see the pattern I'm identifying? Correlation is not causation. Whitaker's voice was tight. You're absolutely right. So let's look at causation. Crockett opened the 5th folder. November 7th, 2018. You were appointed acting attorney general, placing you in direct supervisory authority over the Mueller investigation. The same investigation you had spent 18 months publicly criticizing. The same investigation that FACT Foundation, your largest client, had been demanding be shut down. Your appointment was announced at 2:44 p.m. Eastern. At 6:17 p.m. that same day, FACT Foundation issued a press release praising your appointment and calling you a principled voice for accountability. They also announced a new $1, $2 million campaign to expose deep state overreach in the Russia investigation. And the campaign was funded by an emergency donor solicitation sent to their entire list. That solicitation email, I have it here, mentioned your appointment by name and described you as the right person at the right time to restore integrity to the Department of Justice. Were you aware that the organization paying you millions of dollars was fundraising off your federal appointment within hours of it being announced? The silence that followed was absolute. Whitaker opened his mouth. No words came. He looked at his legal team. One of them started to rise, then sat back down. The press gallery had stopped typing. Every camera was locked on Whitaker's face. 10 seconds. 15. 20. A pen dropped somewhere in the back row. The sound echoed. Whitaker's voice, when it finally came, was barely audible. I was not directly involved in their fundraising operations, but you knew they were fundraising off your appointment. You were on the advisory board. You attended meetings. You received compensation that increased dramatically in the months following your federal appointment. So you had to know. Crockett's voice had not risen, but the words landed like stones dropping into still water. And here's why that matters. You just testified under oath that you disclosed all income. But your financial disclosure filed with the Office of Government Ethics on November 20th, 2018, 13 days after your appointment, lists FACT Foundation payments as consulting income, $750,000 for advisory services. Not $4,750,000. So either your disclosure was incomplete or you're mischaracterizing the payments now. Which is it? Whitaker's face had gone from red to pale. The $750,000 was the amount I received personally. The full amount went to my firm, which had other expenses. Your firm that, according to Iowa business filings, lists you as the sole employee and officer. Your firm that shares a mailing address with your personal residence. Your firm that has no website, no other disclosed clients during the relevant period, and no employees other than you. So when you say the money went to your firm, you're describing a pass-through entity. The money went to you. Crockett opened the 6th folder. And that brings us to February 14th, 2019. Your last day as acting attorney general. Your tenure was 99 days. During those 99 days, you provided written updates to the White House about the Mueller investigation, which was later documented in the Mueller report itself. You declined to recuse yourself from supervising that investigation despite your 18 months of public statements calling it illegitimate. And 14 days after you left office, Fact Foundation made its final payment to your firm, $183,000. The memo line on the check, obtained through a FOIA request to a cooperating financial institution, says, "Completion bonus for strategic services." Mr. Whitaker, what strategic services merited a completion bonus 2 weeks after you left the position that gave you oversight of the investigation your client wanted shut down? Whitaker's hands were trembling. This is a partisan witch hunt. Is it? Crockett's voice was flat. Then let me ask you a simple yes or no question. Did you ever discuss the Mueller investigation with anyone from Fact Foundation during your time as acting attorney general? The silence that followed was longer than the first. Whitaker's lawyer was whispering urgently. Whitaker's face had lost all color. His eyes moved from the lawyer to Crockett to the folders still stacked in front of her. He looked like a man realizing that everything he'd prepared to say had become irrelevant. 30 seconds. 40. Someone in the gallery coughed. The sound was jarring in the absolute quiet. Whitaker's voice cracked. I don't recall specific conversations. You don't recall. Crockett let the words hang. Mr. Whitaker, I'm going to read you an email. This email was sent from your personal Gmail account to a Fact Foundation board member on December 18th, 2018. You were acting attorney general at the time. The email says, received your message about the timeline concerns. I can't provide specifics, but I can tell you the finish line is closer than the press thinks. Expect resolution in Q1. Stay ready on your end. Yeah, that email was part of a document production fact provided to the Senate Judiciary Committee in 2021 during a separate investigation. Were you telling your largest client, the organization that had paid you $2, $4 million, that the Mueller investigation would be concluded in the first quarter of 2019 while you were the person overseeing that investigation? Whitaker pushed his chair back. I need to consult with counsel. You've been consulting with counsel for the last 3 minutes. Crockett's tone was not unkind. It was the voice of someone who understood exactly what was happening and felt no need to rush. But I'm happy to give you time. Take a 5-minute recess, Mr. Chairman. The chairman, visibly stunned by what he'd just witnessed, nodded and gavelled the break. Whitaker stood and walked toward the back of the room with his legal team, his gait unsteady. Crockett remained seated, perfectly still, her hands folded on top of the 6th folder. She did not watch him leave. She looked instead at the papers in front of her as if the confrontation that had just occurred was simply another item to be documented and filed. When the hearing resumed, Whitaker's lawyer requested permission to submit a written response to the allegations within 30 days. Crockett did not object. The chairman recognized her for closing remarks. Mr. Whitaker, you came here today and told this committee I was learning the ropes, that I didn't understand how oversight functions, that I needed to be educated. Her voice was quiet, almost gentle. But what you didn't understand is that oversight isn't about performance. It's not about who talks the loudest or who held the most powerful job. It's about documents. It's about timelines. It's about asking simple questions and waiting for answers that match the receipts. You thought your resume was your defense, but your resume is the crime. You were paid $2, $4 million by an organization funded by conservative dark money to attack a federal investigation. Then you were appointed to oversee that same investigation. Then you received a completion bonus after leaving the job. That's not a witch hunt, Mr. Whitaker. That's just math. She closed the last folder and stacked it neatly with the others. This committee will be referring this matter to the Office of Special Counsel for Investigation into potential violations of federal ethics law, potential false statements in federal disclosure filings, and potential obstruction of justice. Not because you underestimated me, but because the documents don't lie and you couldn't explain them. Whitaker did not return for the remainder of the hearing. His seat sat empty, the leather portfolio still resting on the table, unopened. The cameras captured the empty space. The gallery remained silent. And Crockett, her jacket still without a single crease, began reviewing the materials for the next witness as if nothing extraordinary had happened at all.